Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea podcast here on my movie vlog YouTube channel. My name, of course, is John Campea. I will be your host today. I am humbled and honored that you chose to take some of your precious time today to hang out with me and everybody else to talk about our favorite things, movies, TV, entertainment, things like that. Now, here's how today's show is going to go. I have picked out 6 questions and topics that you guys have sent in to me. If you look in the description of this video, you can get a sneak peek of what those questions and topics are. How do you get a question or topic on the John Campea podcast? It's simple. Just email me anytime at thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. That's thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com as we get things rolling here on this Wednesday afternoon. And we're going to start off with a question from one of my Patreon supporters, Peter Constable. And by the way, guys, if you're interested in becoming one of my Patreon supporters, getting audio-only versions of the daily podcasts, of the Star Wars Talk Tuesdays, amongst other things, check the link in the description below for my Patreon page and get more information there. All right, with the plug out of the way, let's move on to Peter's question. And Peter Constable writes, my question is, what do you think of the possibility of Captain America / Steve Rogers possibly having significantly lesser screen time in Infinity War than Iron Man? I'm basing this off the fact that the D23 trailer only had 1 or 2 shots of Cap, while the rest seemed to be focused on either Tony Stark or the Guardians. Do you think Cap may have significantly lesser screen time compared to the previous Avengers movies? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Peter. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Now, obviously, most of us weren't there at D23, but they have leaked the trailer online, so I'm sure most of you guys have had a chance to see it by now, much to Disney's chagrin. But, I mean, there's a couple things to keep in mind about that as well, okay? Number 1, remember this. Chris Evans, the actor who plays Captain America, his shooting had to work around his other schedule. He was actually one of the last guys in the cast of Infinity War to actually start his shooting. Now, he still shot a lot, but as compared, when you take the entire shooting schedule, some people, if this is the entire Avengers Infinity War shooting schedule, some people shot their roles here, some people shot their roles here, some people shot their roles here. Chris Evans shot his stuff pretty late in the game, so he was one of the last guys to come on and start shooting his role. Now, he was still on set for pretty much as anybody else. It's just that he was later in the process than most other people. That means he was probably still shooting some stuff by the time the D23 came out, but if not, then they had his footage was more fresh. So when they probably cut together that trailer, by the time they cut that trailer together, he was probably still shooting a lot of his stuff. So there probably wasn't as much Chris Evans footage available to the people who made the trailer as there was for the Guardian stuff and the Tony Stark stuff. Now remember, when they started their first day of shooting, we saw pictures of, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Pratt on set. So they were on set at day 1. So clearly they would have more footage available to them to cut that together. Does that mean that Captain America is going to have just as much screen time as, say, Iron Man or the Guardians? No, not necessarily. We simply don't know. The other thing to keep in consideration is this. In asking, will Captain America have reduced screen time in Infinity War than he did in the other movies? Well, the answer to that is he would have to be. Have to be. And that goes the same for, like, Iron Man as well. He has to have a reduced amount of screen time. Why? Because they are cramming more characters in this one movie than they've ever had. More significant characters in this one movie than they've ever had in any other movie. So you got the Guardian. The Guardians isn't just one person either. You got Star-Lord and Gamora and Drax and probably Rocket is going to be there. You've got Iron Man, Captain America, Scarlet Witch. You got Vision. You got Spider-Man. You got Doctor Strange. You got Thor. You got Hulk. You got Hawkeye. The list goes on and on and on and on. Right? So you're going to have Black Panther. You're going to have Falcon, you're going to have Ant-Man, you're going to have, you just got so many characters packed into this. The movie's not going to be 4 hours long. It's going to be a long movie, but it's not going to be 4 hours long. With that in mind, they gotta, everybody's going to have to take a little bit of a step back. You can't have Captain America have the same amount of screen time that he had in Captain America Civil War and still cram in all these other characters. Just can't do it. So will he have a reduced screen time from, say, Civil War? Yes. How much screen time? Don't know, but I wouldn't let how much screen time he had in that first trailer affect your thinking on that at all. Because like I said, there would be a lot more footage of guys like Robert Downey Jr. available to the people who cut the trailers than there would have been for Chris Evans. So don't worry about that. Let's see what happens in the next trailer. And if we hardly see Captain America in the next trailer, maybe we can have this discussion again. But as of right now, I wouldn't worry about it at all. All right, man. Thanks a lot for the question. The next question comes to us from Caleb Boatman, who writes, what movie do you and Anne disagree on most? AKA a movie she really likes that you don't, or vice versa. Love the podcast. Keep up the great work. Well, thanks a lot for the question. For those of you who don't know, Anne is my wife. I'll put up a picture of her here. Anne is my wife. She's the most awesome woman in the world. And for the most part, we actually like and dislike the same movies. We have really different tastes in television, but when it comes to movies, we kind of seem to really gravitate towards the same kinds of movies, which is great. There are some exceptions, though. A movie that I love and adore that she just does not care about is like my favorite horror movie the last 10, 12 years, The Descent. I love The Descent. I think that movie is just like a perfect horror movie. It's just great. On the other hand, Anne just thought it made no sense. She didn't like it. It's not that it scared her. It's just that it's just made no sense to her. She thought it was sloppy and just, she doesn't like it. Hey, all film is subjective. 90% of the time we agree on movies. That one we disagree. On the other side of the coin, a movie she not just lives and breathes for, it's her favorite movie of all time. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, Anne's favorite movie of all time is Tom Hanks's Big. That movie is the shit to her. That's it. Big is Hollywood peaked in Anne's mind with Tom Hanks's Big. And Hollywood actors peaked in Anne's mind with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, she would push me off a bridge if she thought I was obstructing her view of Tom Hanks. Like if we're standing on a bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, Tom Hanks turns out is standing over there, she will literally push me off the bridge just so she can get a better look at Tom Hanks for a moment. That's how much she loves Tom Hanks. And the movie Big. And I don't dislike Big. I like Big. But I like it. I think it's a good movie. But like the fact that I don't put in my top 10 or top 20 movies of all time is almost grounds for divorce to Anne. That's it. She loves that movie. So those are the movies that we disagree on. It's a great question. I'm curious for those of you watching, for those of you that have a significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, jump into the comments section below. Let us know what are some films that really divide you and your significant other. Let us know in the comment section below. I'm really curious to see what the answers to those are. All right. Thanks a lot for the question, Caleb. All right. We move on now to the next question. And the next question comes to us from Chad R Petersen, who writes, when it was officially announced, I felt that Marvel pulled off a big coup when Brie Larson was tapped to portray Captain Marvel. The MCU has plenty of great actors, but I thought nabbing an Oscar-winning actor, and well-respected one, was a huge get. Do you feel that she has enough cachet to perhaps bring in a significant audience that may not normally go see a comic book superhero film? Thanks a lot for the question, Chad. Appreciate that. Yeah, when they announced that they got Brie Larson, at the time, the reigning Best Actress winner at the Academy Awards, that was fantastic. Great get, not just because she's an Academy Award winning actress, not just because she's beautiful, not just because she's great, but also because she's perfect for that role. She's a good fit for the role too. It was a grand slam. Casting her to play Captain Marvel was an absolute grand slam. Now, asking the question, does she carry enough cachet to bring in a significant group of people who wouldn't otherwise go to see a comic book movie? I'm going to say no, for two reasons. One, she is still a relative newcomer to Hollywood. In relative terms, she's a relative newcomer. My dad hasn't watched 15 of her films. You know what I'm saying? She's not somebody like a Daniel Day-Lewis. She's not somebody like a Michael Douglas. She's not somebody like, along those, she's not a George Clooney. She's not a Brad Pitt. She's not Julia Roberts. She's not, she hasn't been around a long time for a lot of people of a lot of different age generations to also be attached to her. So there's that. But the more important issue, the reason why I don't think she carries enough cachet to bring it in is not because of anything about her. It's that I don't think any actor today, other than The Rock, but we've even seen The Rock's gas tank starting to run out a little bit, no actor today will bring in a huge audience just because their name is on the poster. It doesn't happen anymore. Hasn't happened for a while. Just putting Brie Larson's name on the poster does not guarantee you X amount of more people will come see the movie that otherwise would not have come to see the movie. It doesn't happen anymore. It's just not the case. Now, putting her in the movie will make the movie a better movie, and being a better movie will attract more people because the reviews will be better, the word of mouth will be better, the audience will like it more, they'll talk to their friends, and that will bring more people out. So in that case, yes, her being in the movie will bring out more people, but just her name on the poster, just the fact that it says Captain Marvel starring Brie Larson, that's not going to bring out a whole ton of people because it doesn't matter what actress you put in there. It wouldn't have added 25% more people who otherwise would never have gone to see a comic book movie. Other than Meryl Streep. Maybe Meryl Streep. You put, I think just out of then pure curiosity, a lot of people would have come out to see what the hell is Meryl Streep doing playing Captain Marvel. But yeah, seriously, it's nobody's name. I can't think of a single actress. You put their name up there, you'll get a whole ton of people who never would have gone to see a comic book movie now want to come see a comic book movie because that name's on there. So it's not a knock on Brie Larson at all to say, no, her name will not bring out that extra audience. What she will do is, as far as an actor can do it, she will play her role great and therefore making the movie a little bit better than it otherwise would have been. And that will attract more people. But just the name on the poster? I don't think so. I don't think we're living in that kind of an age anymore. All right. Thanks a lot for the question, Chad. The next question today comes to us from Stephen J. Donkers. And Stephen J. Donkers writes, my question is, if you could put together a short list of movies you enjoy immensely, but not too many people have watched them or even heard of them, which gems would be on your list? A few of the movies I love that not many people have heard of include The Fisher King, Body Snatchers, Some Kind of Wonderful, The Goon, The Waterdance, and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Thanks a lot for the question, Stephen. Yeah, I think all of us as film fans, this is one of the great things about being a movie fan, is that all of us, to one degree or another, have a couple of those films in our repertoire that are real precious to us, but that not a lot of people have seen or know about. And those are precious films. And it's always one of the greatest joys of a movie fan's life when you get to sit down with a buddy or a friend and show them that movie that maybe they never heard of or had heard of but never really saw. That's a great thrill for any movie fan to share a movie with somebody that you love, with somebody who hasn't seen it yet. It's one of my favorite things in the world. It's kind of funny because that plays out all the time. Like me and Ann and maybe a couple of friends of ours will say, oh, let's go to the movies tonight. Say, oh, what movie do you want to go see? Oh, maybe we'll go see Thor or whatever. And then the friends will say, oh, but John, I know you've already seen that, so you probably don't want to see it again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm the type of guy, loser. I'm the type of guy that I will go back. If I like a movie, I will go back to the theater 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times and watch it over and over and over and over again. And I love watching movies I love with people who haven't seen it yet. One of my favorite things. So anyway, what are some of those films to me? There are a couple. You've probably heard me mention them at one point or another before. One of them is the aforementioned The Descent. Not a whole ton of people have seen The Descent. Like I said, to me, one of the best horror movies of the past 10, 15, 20 years. I just love that movie deeply. It's so beautifully directed by Marshall, by the way. And Marshall is directing the new Hellboy reboot. So that's probably the main thing that's got me excited for the new Hellboy reboot, is the fact that Neil Marshall, who directed one of my all-time favorite horror films, The Descent, is directing Hellboy. I think that was a perfect match. That director with that film. I think that was wonderful. So The Descent is one of the films on my list. I know a lot of you guys haven't seen it yet. Check out The Descent. Another film is a slobbering, messy, goofy, stupid movie that I love. And it's like from the 80s. It's called Megaforce. Find a way. I don't know where on earth you can watch Megaforce. But it was released in theaters. It was a major release in theaters. Just nobody saw it, and it got panned critically, understandably so. But there's something so beautifully cheesy about that movie that I just eat it up. It's called Megaforce. It's basically a G.I. Joe ripoff. It's like this international, like secretly, the nations of the world put together this international military force made up of people from all different countries that are supposed to be like a secret organization that go in and take out terrorist threats. And it's cheesy and it's fun. It's Life is like a wheel. It all comes around. That's the big saying from Ace. And yes, the lead character's name is Ace. Anyway, so there's that one. The third one I'll put on that list is one I'm sure you've heard me talk about. It's called Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Find a way. It's on the different streaming services. If you search for Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, you'll find it. Get a couple of buddies, get some pizza, a couple drinks, sit down and just watch and laugh. It is both a great spoof of a horror movie that then about after 3/4 of the movie, it transitions from being a spoof of a horror movie into its own horror movie at the same time. It's a brilliantly done project. It really is. The first 3/4 of the film are hilarious, like absolutely hilarious as they deconstruct the horror genre. It's brilliantly done. And then once they get to about 3/4 of the way through the film, they flip a switch, and then it becomes, for the last like 25% of the movie, its own version of a horror movie, like a legit horror movie. Wonderfully done. It's brilliant. I love that film. So yeah, the three I would talk about are The Descent, Megaforce, and Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Those are the three that I would mention. I want to know what you guys, what are some of your hidden gems? The movies that you love that not a lot of people have seen or anybody's even heard of. Jump into the comments section below and start sharing those treats with everybody else. All right, thanks a lot for this question, Stephen. We now move on to the next question, which comes to us from somebody who apparently watched Deadpool. It's Maximum Effort. And Maximum Effort writes, my question is, did Marvel/Disney make a mistake by working out a deal with Sony to quote-unquote share Spider-Man? Would it have been better for Marvel long-term to not bring Spidey into the MCU at this time in the hopes that audiences would gain Sony Spider-Man fatigue, thus leaving Sony with little option but to let the rights revert back to Marvel? In other words, did Marvel just grab a piece of the pie today at the expense of getting the whole pie tomorrow? All right, thanks a lot for the question, Maximum Effort, and it's a fair question. You know, there's a lot of us, including myself, I fully admit this, that before they announced that Sony was in big financial trouble, I said for the longest time, there is no way you'll ever see Sony share Spider-Man or have Spider-Man pop up in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, blah, blah, blah. I said, no way, no how. Now, if you go back and watch the videos from way back then, after they started announcing and after it became aware that Sony was in big financial trouble, the corporation was in upheaval, blah, 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 then I started to change my tune a little bit. I went, well, maybe it could happen. I mean, Sony might have to do something here. And eventually we got the deal. And of course it happened. Still surprised me. Even though I knew it was a possibility at that point, it still surprised me. But they did it. And I love Spider-Man Homecoming. And, you know, whatever you heard, oh, it was all Marvel, oh, it was all Sony. I've got some people who are very close to the production of that movie that said it was a real collaborative effort. That it was the Spider-Man Homecoming we got on the big screen was very much a 50-50% of the movie that Sony wanted to make and the movie that Marvel wanted to make. And they compromised and they made this mesh of a movie and it turned out great. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I think it's terrific. Well, that being said, it is fair to ask, couldn't Marvel have waited a few more years to the point that Sony just realizes they have to give up on making Spider-Man movies and then let the rights just all go back to Marvel? So now it's Marvel. Because remember, Spider-Man is still Sony's. They're not sharing him with Marvel. Sony still owns the movie rights to Spider-Man. 100% they own them. However, they just have a deal where they allow Marvel to be the production company on it. They pay Marvel a fee and Marvel gets to put the character in the MCU. That's their current deal. That lasts for a couple of more films. But did Marvel make a mistake? Couldn't they have held their ground for a few more years, bit their lip, and then just waited for Sony to have to give up on Spider-Man? The answer to that question is no. It never would have happened. I think anybody out there that thinks Sony was ever going to let Spider-Man just go are deluding themselves. Seriously. And here's the one argument I always hear people bring up on the other side is saying, but The Amazing Spider-Man was such a flop. I mean, Sony lost so much money with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Not The Amazing Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Sony lost so much money with The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was such a disaster and a flop. Surely they couldn't have held on to Spider-Man for much longer. Understand this. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, while it is true that it made less money than a lot of the other Spider-Mans, maybe any of the other Spider-Mans, while it is true it made less money, was on a downward trajectory from the previous Amazing Spider-Man. And all that's true. This is also true. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 made over $700 million at the box office. $700 million at the box office. And that was their worst one. $700 million bucks, and that was their worst one. So this notion that, oh my gosh, Sony's on the brink of giving up on... No, they were not. Now, let's bring up something here. I'm going to bring up, if you'll indulge me for just a second. I should have brought this up earlier, but I didn't. Let's look at Fantastic Four for a second. Okay? So let's look at Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was just out for Fox, right? And... here we go. Let me bring it up on Box Office Mojo. Here's a number for you to wrap your head around, okay? Fantastic Four, which Fox did, and they're still holding on to Fantastic Four. I think they should let Fantastic Four go, but they're still holding on to Fantastic Four. And they're talking now. There have been reports out lately about them doing a new Fantastic Four movie and all that kind of stuff. They're still holding on to Fantastic Four. You know how much money Fantastic Four made at the box office, this most recent one? Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 made over $700 million, all right? You think the last Fantastic Four made $500 million, $400 million, $300 million, $200 million? The Fantastic Four movie worldwide made $168 million. $168 million. And Fox is still holding on to it. They're still not giving up on it. They still believe they can make magic happen with the Fantastic Four. They still believe in the property. And they're holding on to it. And it made $168 million. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 made over $700 million. If you think for 1 second that Sony was about to just give the rights up to Spider-Man, the most profitable film franchise they have, you're kind of fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself a little bit. And I think Marvel knew that. I think Marvel saw the writing on the wall. They knew we could play a waiting game. Actually, I think Marvel was playing a waiting game for a number of years. I think they were waiting for the next Spider-Man movie to bomb. But the next Spider-Man movie always came out, and no matter how good or how bad the movie was, it made Sony a bunch of money. Now, they spent a lot of money on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it barely made them any profit, but it's still profitable. And it's the most, Sony doesn't have any other thing in their repertoire that makes them nearly as much money as the Spider-Man franchise does. So they were never going to let it go. And I think after seeing The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Marvel and Kevin Feige and the rest of the Bob Iger over there at Disney, they probably went, you know what? That movie wasn't very good, and they still made over $700 million. They ain't giving them up. They ain't giving them up. So let's talk to them and let's make a deal. So to answer your question, Maximum Effort, no, I think Marvel made the right move. I think they knew that the best they could get, because Sony was in a position of strength. As much as we like to think they weren't, the fact of the matter is they were. I think Marvel got a really good deal for themselves. They made the best deal they could, and it's working for them. And we're going to see Spider-Man in Infinity War, and who would have ever thought that would have happened? So if they made a good deal, and I think if they tried to wait out Sony, they would have been waiting for another 15, 20 years. Honestly, I really do. All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And with that, we now move on to the final question of the day. And the final question of the day also comes to us from one of my Patreon supporters. It comes to us from Justin Lee. And Justin Lee writes, when talking about the standalone Joker film, you always attach Scorsese produced in front of it. But should we really be excited about that? Nolan produced Man of Steel, but didn't have a major role in that film at all. For all we know, Scorsese could have pitched the idea of a taxi driver feel, and that's it. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Justin, and you're absolutely right. The term director in Hollywood is a completely understood one. If we say somebody is the director on the film, we know exactly what it is they're doing on the movie. If somebody is the writer of the film, we know exactly what their role in that movie is. If somebody is the actor in the film, we know exactly what it is they're doing in the film. In Hollywood, though, the term producer is so translucent. It's so vague because it could literally mean almost anything. You could get a producer credit on a movie for, wait a sec, so you're making this movie and you want Brad Pitt in it. Okay, I'm friends with Brad Pitt. Do you want me to set up a meeting? I've got an in with Brad because I know him. Do you want me to set up a meeting with him? I get producer credit. It could be that. The producer could also be the real producer, the person behind the scenes who gets the script, who hires the writers, who brings in the director, who works out the vision with the movie, with the director as a whole, and oversees everything in the movie and puts it together. That is also the producer. So it is such a, shifting sands kind of, like when somebody says they're a producer on a thing, you have no idea what it is they mean. So Justin brings up a great point. When we're hearing that Scorsese is producing the movie, what does that really mean? I mean, Christopher Nolan was a producer on Man of Steel, but he didn't do anything on that movie. So should we get excited about the idea of Martin Scorsese actually being the producer on a Joker movie? I would say yes. Now, look, the real definition of a producer, what a real producer does is they're really the ones who are in charge of the whole movie. There's a reason at the Academy Awards when they announce Best Picture, the people who come up and get awarded the trophy for Best Picture is the producer of the film because it's their film. They're the ones who, picked out the script and hired the writers to change the script the way he wanted to. And then they're the ones that hire the director and sits down with the director, make sure the vision of the director and the vision of the producer are on the same page with each other. Then they're the ones who are in charge to make sure the director gets everything they need, to make sure, everything is there so that the director can execute the film the way they want. The producer, the real producer, is really the one in charge of the film. I have a feeling that you don't enter into negotiations with somebody to be a figurehead producer. The reason I really believe they are looking at getting Scorsese on board here to really be the real producer of this movie is you don't have reports about talks and negotiations for just a figurehead. You don't do that. You just announce it later. Oh, Martin Scorsese is going to be a producer, and Martin Scorsese maybe gave him a couple ideas and agreed to put his name on it for a paycheck. Steven Spielberg does it all the time. Steven Spielberg is my favorite filmmaker of all time, but Steven Spielberg does do that on the time because he's smart. But I don't think that's the case here. I think they are really bringing in Martin Scorsese to be the producer of the movie. I think it's going to be his vision of the movie. I think he's going to work with the director that they brought on board, the same director who did the Hangover, by the way, Todd Phillips. I think they're going to bring in Todd Phillips. He's going to sit down with Todd Phillips. I think Scorsese knows the vision he has for the Joker. I think he's going to make sure him and Todd Phillips are on the same page. Then once all that's done, they're going to let him loose. I think Scorsese is actually going to be the producer. Now, we won't know for sure until the movie is officially announced and we see what their credit list is. But I don't think again, I said, you don't enter into negotiations. You don't enter into talks with somebody who's going to be a figurehead. You enter into negotiations and talks with a talent when you want them to be the driving force. And I do believe Martin Scorsese is going to be the driving force on that. So again, that might not be true. Okay, we're going to have to wait and see. But the way it's all kind of unfolding, my guess right now is that, Scorsese is the legit producer on the movie. Anyway, guys, that will do it for me for this installment of the John Campea podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Just want to remind you once again, if you want an audio-only version of the podcast, you like to listen to it on your way to work, to school, or at the gym, or whatever it is you like to do, become one of my Patreon supporters. We make audio-only versions of this show and Star Wars Talk Tuesday available as well as access to our exclusive Facebook group, our members, weekly exclusive chats that we have, all that kind of good stuff. Just check out the Patreon link below and get all the information there. I also want to remind you guys, since you're here already, why don't you take a second, click on the subscribe button, become a subscriber of the John Campea YouTube channel. That would be amazing. If you like this video or any of the others, make sure you click the thumbs up button, give it a like, leave a comment, and hey, if you really like one of the videos, take it and share it on your social media. And speaking of social media, make sure you're following me on Twitter, where I post all the time. You can find me on Twitter simply at John Campea. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me today, and until next time, bye-bye.